Welcome to a short excerpt from the Gale Hill Radio Hour, featuring Jack Torry, author of The Last One Out, the new biography of Yates McDaniel. Jack describes his subject as World War II's most daring reporter, and for good reason. In this section of his interview, Jack talks about the many risks taken by McDaniel during his illustrious years as a war correspondent.
When he was in Singapore, he was the last Western reporter to leave. Okay, and he's sitting there in his hotel room in Singapore. He's got a British censor next to him who's having breakfast of biscuits and brandy, and he's got another PR guy next to him saying, "Come on, we got to get going. We got to get going." And Yates writes his what became known as his goodbye to Singapore. And the opening line is, "The sky over Singapore is black with the smoke of a dozen huge fires as I write my last message from this once beautiful, prosperous, and peaceful city."
Oh, that's quite beautiful. And it sums it all up, doesn't it?
It does. It does. It's a great story. And every now and again it pops up. Robert Weintraub, who used to be at the New York Times, wrote a book about, and I'm going to look it up here while I'm at it. He wrote a book about a British officer who escaped from Singapore and was in large part saved by his dog, whose name was Judy. And I'm trying to see what the name of the, let's see here. Judy. No better friend. One man, one dog, and their extraordinary story of courage and survival. It's a really good book. I would recommend it highly. But in there, he mentions Yates, who was at that time in Singapore, and he quotes from the Goodbye to Singapore story, which was printed all over the world in British, American, Australian papers. And he was like this international star at that time. And he was on his escape from Singapore in this rickety old Yangtze River steamer. The boat was sunk by the Japanese, and about 132 survivors got to a deserted island. And they waited for a rescue ship, and that's where the cover photo comes from. Yates is sitting on a fallen log, typing his notes. And it's just it's an incredible story. And like I said, he should not have survived.
Yes. How many times do you think he escaped death? Did you have any idea from your research?
He even joked about it during the American and Australian landing in the Philippines in 1945. He writes a letter to his wife, Natalie, who's in Australia. And he says, "Had one of my narrow escapes last night, but a Japanese shell had just missed the ship." But if you look at Nanking and Tientsin, which was fell to the Japanese in 1937, and Hankow in 1938, and Singapore in 1942, he was pretty lucky to survive. Jeez. I mean, this escape from Singapore, it's first on a Yangtze River steamer. It gets sunk. They're then picked up by a Malayan planter's boat, and they have this incredibly high sea, escape to Sumatra, where they then hire a bus and they travel up the mountains of Sumatra and down until they reach the port of Emmehaven, which was a Dutch port on the western coast of Sumatra. They manage to get on a British destroyer there, and they reach Java, which he then has to quickly leave because Java's falling to the Japanese. And he gets on a old cattle boat, which made about 7 knots, which is probably 8 miles an hour. and they have to go all the way from Batavia in Java to Perth in Australia, which is a couple thousand miles. Nobody thought they were going to live, and there he is. He just was one.
He lived to tell about it. He lived to write about it.
Yep. There's a funny thing too, because he dies of lung cancer. He was a heavy smoker, like a lot of reporters there. And when he's cleaning out his apartment in Singapore, he takes 2 cameras, a typewriter, binoculars, his credentials, and 3 big tins of Camel cigarettes.
Oh, boy.
Because if I'm going to be stuck someplace, I'm going to have to smoke. And he, so he was a lifetime smoker, and he was diagnosed with lung cancer about 2 weeks before he died, and that was it.
This is Kate Jones. Thank you for listening to a portion of the Gale Hill Radio Hour. You'll find more excerpts on this YouTube channel and entire episodes on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts, iHeart, and other podcast directories.